The first story happened in Prague, in a cheap hostel just outside the city center. I was 23, traveling alone for the first time, and trying to do Europe as cheaply as possible. That meant overnight buses, supermarket sandwiches, and the absolute cheapest hostels I could find. The one in Prague had decent reviews online. Nothing amazing, but good enough. The photos showed clean bunk beds, lockers, and one of those little common areas with fairy lights and mismatched sofas. It looked harmless. I got there just after dark. The girl at reception barely looked up when I checked in. She handed me a key card, circled my room number on a map, and told me the front doors locked at midnight. My room was on the 3rd floor. There were 6 bunks in it, but when I first walked in, only one other bed looked occupied. There was a backpack under the lower bunk opposite mine, and a pair of boots beside it. I remember feeling relieved. One other person in the room felt manageable. I put my bag in the locker, went out to get food, wandered around for a while, and came back at maybe 11:30. When I opened the room door again, the lights were off. I used my phone torch and saw that all the other beds were still empty. Just the same backpack, just the same boots, and what looked like someone lying under a blanket in that lower bunk. I climbed into my top bunk, plugged my phone in, and tried to sleep. At first it was fine. Then, sometime after 1 in the morning, I woke up because I heard movement. Not normal tossing around, slow movement, like someone was standing up carefully, trying not to make noise. I opened my eyes and looked over the edge of the bunk. The room was dark, but not pitch black. There was enough light coming in from the street outside to make out shapes, and I could see him. The guy from the lower bunk wasn't just walking to the bathroom. He was standing completely still in the middle of the room, looking up at me. I froze. I honestly think part of my brain just refused to process it. He was barefoot, tall, thin, shirtless, and he was just standing there with his head tilted slightly back, staring directly into my bunk. I remember trying to tell myself he was sleepwalking. That had to be it. That was the only explanation that made sense. Then he whispered, very quietly, "Are you awake?" That's when every bit of sleep left my body. I didn't answer. I just stayed still and kept my eyes almost closed, hoping he couldn't tell I was looking at him. Then he moved closer. I could hear the floorboards creak underneath him. One step, then another, until he was standing right beside the ladder to my bunk. I could smell alcohol on him. He stood there for a few seconds, then put one hand on the ladder. I genuinely thought he was about to climb up. Instead, he whispered again, "Why did you come back?" I didn't move, didn't breathe, nothing. I just pretended to be asleep so he would hopefully go away. And after what felt like forever, he slowly took his hand off the ladder and walked back across the room. I heard the mattress springs on the lower bunk opposite mine creak as he got back in. I stayed awake until morning, didn't sleep for a second. At about 7, I climbed down as quietly as I could, grabbed my stuff, and left the room. The lower bunk was empty. The blanket was thrown back, and that backpack and those boots from earlier were gone. I went straight to reception and told the girl what happened. She looked confused and asked what bed numbers he was in. I pointed to the lower bunk opposite mine. She checked the system. Then she frowned and said that bed hadn't been assigned to anyone. I told her that was impossible. Someone had been sleeping there. She called the manager over. He checked too. Same answer. No one was supposed to be in that bed. At first I thought they were just covering themselves, until the manager asked me something that made my stomach drop. He asked if I was sure the man had come from that bunk. because the keycard records showed nobody had entered our room after 10:14 p.m. I got back at 11:27, which meant whoever was inside that room when I returned was already in there waiting. I left the hostel that morning and booked somewhere else. A week later, I got a message through the hostel booking app. It was from another girl who had stayed in the same room 2 nights after me. She'd found me because we'd both left public reviews. Her message just said, "Did someone stand next to your bed too?" I never replied. I didn't want to know how much of my story matched hers. The second story happened in Lisbon, and it started when someone in that hostel room invaded my privacy. I had been in Portugal for 4 days when I checked into a party hostel in Lisbon. I already knew it probably wasn't my kind of place. The lobby was packed. There was loud music downstairs. People were drinking at 2 in the afternoon, and every wall seemed covered in neon signs telling you to make memories. But it was cheap, central, and I only needed it for 2 nights. My room had 8 beds. By the time I checked in, 3 of them were already taken. 2 girls from Germany, 1 guy from Australia, and another bed with clothes and chargers all over it, but no person there. Everyone seemed normal enough. That first night, I went out with a group from the hostel, had a few drinks, and came back around midnight. Nothing weird happened. The next morning, though, I noticed something strange. My locker was open, not wide open, just slightly. At first I assumed I'd forgotten to shut it properly, so I closed it, locked it, and went out for the day. That evening I came back, open again. This time I knew I hadn't left it like that. I checked my stuff immediately. Passport still there, wallet still there, camera still there. Nothing was missing. That should have made me feel better. It didn't, because if nobody was stealing from me, why were they opening it? That night I stayed in the room longer than usual, pretended to be on my phone, pretended to be tired, just watched. The Australian guy went out around 10. One of the girls showered, the other one was FaceTiming someone from her bunk. And the guy in the messy bed, the one I hadn't really spoken to, kept glancing over at me. Not constantly, just enough for me to notice. He was older than everyone else in the room, maybe late 30s, maybe 40. Quiet, not obviously creepy, but the kind of quiet that made you aware of him. At one point, he asked where I was traveling next. I told him, maybe Madrid. He nodded and said, "You should be careful telling people your plans." I laughed a little because I thought he meant it in a normal way. Then he said, "People listen." That night I locked my bag, checked it twice, and went to sleep. At around 3 a.m., I woke up to a metallic click. I stayed still. Another click. It was my locker. I could hear someone trying to open it slowly. I opened my eyes just enough to see through the gap in my curtain. Someone was crouched in front of it. At first all I could see was their back. Then they shifted slightly, and I saw his face in the reflection of the window. The older guy. He wasn't trying to force the locker. He was using a key. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I'd make a noise. He opened it just enough to slide his hand inside. And he didn't grab money. He didn't grab electronics. He pulled out my passport. Then he sat there in the dark, flipping through it, page by page, slowly, reading it, looking at my photo, looking at my full name. Then he took my phone charging cable too. Not the phone, just the cable. He closed the locker carefully, locked it again, and went back to bed. I didn't move for over an hour. In the morning, I checked. passport was back. The cable was back. Everything was exactly where it had been. I went straight downstairs and told reception. They looked concerned, but also weirdly unsurprised. They asked for his bed number. Then they asked if he'd said anything to me. I repeated the conversation about travel plans. That's when one of the staff exchanged a look with the other. Apparently, a girl had complained about him the previous week. Not for theft, not for assault, just for making her uncomfortable and somehow knowing what city she was traveling to next. They hadn't removed him because he hadn't technically done anything. At least not enough. I packed up immediately and booked somewhere else. Before I left, I checked my locker key against the spare key at reception. They were identical. Same shape, same cut, same number. Whoever assigned lockers had somehow given him access to mine too. That should have been the end of it. But 3 days later, when I checked into my hostel in Madrid, the receptionist looked at my passport, looked at me, and said, "Oh, your friend already checked if you arrived." I told him I didn't have any friends meeting me there. He said a man had come in earlier, asking if I'd checked in yet. He knew my first name, and he knew I was traveling alone. The last story is the one that would have made me stop backpacking completely. This happened in northern Thailand, in a hostel outside Chiang Mai. It wasn't a party hostel. It wasn't dirty. It wasn't one of those places that immediately feels dangerous. Actually, it looked perfect. Small, quiet, garden courtyard, string lights, wooden balconies, a few private rooms and a few shared dorms. I booked a 4-bed female dorm for 3 nights. The first day was completely normal. I rented a scooter, visited a waterfall, came back for dinner, and spent the evening talking to 2 girls in my room. One was from Canada, one was from Sweden. The 4th bed was empty. At around 11, we all went to sleep. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up because I heard the door open. I looked at my phone, 2:16 a.m. At first, I assumed one of the girls was coming back from the bathroom, but then I heard a sound, the door handle being twisted, then the door quietly being pushed open. I sat up slightly and looked through the darkness. A man was standing inside our room. He wasn't staff. He wasn't a guest from our room. I knew that immediately. He was older, maybe 50s, wearing dark clothes, and he had one hand on the inside handle of the door, like he was ready to shut it quickly. In his other hand, he was holding something long and black. For one horrifying second, I thought it was a weapon. Then I realized it was a length of cable or rope. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could, the girl in the bed nearest the door suddenly said, "Wrong room." Her voice was shaky, but loud enough to break whatever silence he was using. The man turned toward her slowly. Then he smiled, not embarrassed, not apologetic, just calm. Then he stepped backward into the hallway and closed the door. None of us moved. I think we were all waiting for one of the others to say something first. Then the Canadian girl whispered, "Did you see what he was holding?" That was enough. We all got out of bed at the same time and pushed the dresser in front of the door. Then we called reception. No answer. Called again. Nothing. The desk closed overnight. We barely slept. At first light, we moved the dresser and went straight downstairs. The morning receptionist looked completely lost when we explained what happened. She checked the cameras in the corridor with the owner. There was footage. You could see the man walking slowly down the hallway at 2:14 a.m., stopping outside our room, trying the handle, then going inside. The owner said he didn't recognize him, said he wasn't one of the guests, said he must have slipped in from the street before they locked up. That should have been bad enough. But while they were checking the footage, the receptionist suddenly paused the screen and zoomed in on something else. Earlier that same night, around 1:40 a.m., the same man had gone to 3 other doors first. He tried room 8, then room 11, then room 12, all locked. Then he reached our room, room 14, and our door opened immediately because one of us had forgotten to fully latch it after coming back from dinner. The owner apologized over and over and offered us free breakfast and a refund. We all left anyway. I thought about that man for weeks afterward, mostly because I couldn't stop wondering what would have happened if none of us had woken up. About 6 months later, I was scrolling through a newspaper and saw a story from Thailand about backpackers that had gone missing from hostels, murdered, and their organs sold on the black market. A shiver of dread shot through my body. I thought to myself, what a sick and horrible world this can be. Maybe the man was a kidnapper, but to this day I will never know who he was or what he came into our room for.